I hope you have all been to coastal regions at least once to experience the soothing and calm nature of oceans and seas. But these water bodies are not always quiet and calm. Sometimes they become violent, affecting the people and the assets in the coastal regions. And this is mainly because of a phenomena called as cyclones. So in this video, we shall try and understand the cyclones. What are they? What are the different types of cyclones? Where do they occur? When do they occur? And how do they occur? Let us begin our discussion by understanding the origin and meaning of the word cyclone. Basically, the word cyclone is derived from a Greek word called cyclos, meaning coiling of a snake. In a more simpler manner, you can compare the formation of a cyclone to the rotation of a cycle wheel. So, in general, a cyclone is a storm or system of winds that rotates about a center of low atmospheric pressure. So, if these cyclones are being formed in the tropical region, that is 23° north and south between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, these cyclones are termed as tropical cyclones. As per Wikipedia, a tropical cyclone is defined as a rapidly rotating storm system characterized by a low pressure center, a closed low level atmospheric circulation, strong winds, and a spiral arrangement of thunderstorms that produce heavy rains. We have a lot of underlying concepts to understand here. Firstly, what constitutes a low pressure system? Then what is a closed low level atmospheric circulation? And then what causes spiral arrangement of thunderstorms, and ultimately how heavy rains are produced? Like we discussed earlier, tropical cyclones are cyclic formations of winds around a low pressure area. They are generally formed between 5° and 23° north and south latitudes. They are called with different names in different regions of the world. They are called as cyclones in the Indian Ocean region, and in Western Pacific Ocean they are called as typhoons, and in Western Australia they are called as willy willies. They are also called as hurricanes and tornadoes in USA. What you need to remember here is that these are different names given to a same phenomenon. However, there are slight variations in the intensity of these storms. Now there are few favorable conditions which are required for the formation of a cyclone. Firstly, we need larger sea surface with temperature above 27 degrees Celsius. Next thing we need is the presence of the Coriolis force enough to create a cyclonic vortex. Likewise, for the formation of a cyclone, we also need small variations in the vertical wind speed. Now because the sun is vertically overhead above the tropical region, the sea surface temperatures are usually high. So, the first favorable condition for the formation of tropical cyclone is present in the tropical region. Like I mentioned earlier, a tropical cyclone has a weak low pressure center, which is also called as the eye of a cyclone. I hope you are all well aware of the movement of winds. Winds generally move from high pressure areas to low pressure areas. So technically speaking, if there is a low pressure area, winds from the surrounding high pressure areas should come and merge here. But this is not the case in reality. In reality, winds move in a circular manner. Why is it so? This circular movement of winds is mainly because of the presence of the Coriolis force. So what then is the Coriolis force? Now we all know that the earth rotates from west to east on its axis. Now suppose imagine if the earth's rotation was static, which means it was non-rotating, then surface winds from North Pole would directly move in a straight line. But in reality, it is taking a slight deviation towards its right. So this is happening because of the presence of Coriolis force. Hence, we can conclusively define the Coriolis force as an apparent force that as a result of the Earth's rotation deflects moving objects to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. Or in more simpler manner, we can say that winds in the northern hemisphere starting from their origin deflect towards the right in their line of path. And in the southern hemisphere, the same winds deflect to their left in their line of path. So if two winds are diverging to the right in the northern hemisphere, it forms anti-cyclic rotation. And this is because of the presence of the Coriolis force. And eventually, when these moving winds find a low pressure area, they try to converge in it, because we all know that winds move from high pressure areas to low pressure areas. So because of this tendency, these winds start moving in a circular manner to converge ultimately at the center. and thus we have a cyclic storm which forms the basis of a tropical cyclone. So this is generally a top view of the cyclone or tropical cyclone. And please note here that the direction of rotation of winds in the southern hemisphere is clockwise. Now we all know that the presence of Coriolis force is a must for the formation of a cyclone, that is tropical cyclone. And since this Coriolis force is zero near the equator or on the equator, there are no cyclones formed on the equator. So that is the reason why we see tropical cyclones being formed between 5 and 20 degree north and south latitudes. And similarly, the next favorable condition for the formation of a tropical cyclone is small variations in the vertical wind speed. And there are also noticeable temperature changes of the wind along its altitude. And the fourth factor which is necessary for the formation of a cyclone is high humidity. And in the absence of humidity, the cyclones become weaker and eventually die off. This is the reason why cyclones become weaker when they pass on to land from the sea surface. See, basically any cyclone intensifies or weakens because of evaporation and condensation. And these two factors are generally guided by the presence of high humidity. Now please note here, these are some of the important favorable conditions which are required for the formation of a cyclone. Apart from this, there are many other factors like the presence of pre-existing disturbance or the presence of ITCZ, etc. So now the most important question we have is, how do cyclones occur or how are cyclones formed? So far we know that cyclones have a low pressure center and they form in a spiral or cyclic manner when viewed from the top angle. So now we shall understand the side view or front view of a cyclone formation. So the first underlying factor we know is that the presence of warmer sea temperatures, which is 27 degrees Celsius or above. Now because of this warmer sea temperature, a low pressure area is created and on which the surrounding winds converge. So what happens after converging? These winds which are converging carry the moisture from the surrounding seas, and once they converge, they start rising above the surface. While rising, these warm moisture laden winds ultimately become cold winds, and the moisture released from these winds turn into clouds. These winds formed are cumulonimbus clouds, which are nearly 10 to 12 kilometers long above the surface. And once these clouds reach the tropopause, they start spreading sidewards. It is because the clouds cannot exist beyond tropopause. And in the meantime, within the eye of the storm, a large amount of latent heat is generated because of the conversion of water vapor to water droplets. And because of the presence of this latent heat, the air surrounding becomes warmer and it eventually subsides to the ground. So basically, within the eye of the cyclone, this small amount of warmer air is subsiding into the low pressure area. Parallelly, the air which was diverging at the tropopause subsides somewhere near the surface at about 200 kilometers away from the eye of the cyclone. And this subsided wind again converges into the low pressure area. This then is eventually forming a cycle in the cyclone. So in summary, a low pressure area is present here with temperature above 27 degrees Celsius. Now winds from the surrounding areas converge here to eventually spiral above the surface. And as they rise above the surface, they release latent heat. And this latent heat makes the air present in the eye of the cyclone warmer, which eventually subside down into the low pressure area. And the rising air which forms the eye wall of a cyclone eventually subsides at around 200 kilometers away from the low pressure area of the cyclone. And further, these subsided winds again form and converge at the low pressure area. And during the whole process, cumulonimbus clouds are formed, which are as long as 10 to 12 kilometers in height. And please note here, in the entire structure of a cyclone, eye wall is said to be the most destructive part. It is because the air in this region is spiraling upwards at a rapid speed. So this is the form in which cyclonic or tropical cyclones emerge, form and eventually die off.